Why is a tech industry powerhouse focused on data privacy? Our guest today is Amruta Moktali. She is the Chief Product Officer at Skyflow, which is the world's first and only data privacy vault that is delivered as an API. And previously, she was a leader at Microsoft, Topsy Labs, Salesforce, and Cleo. And now she has dedicated her time and expertise to building a future where data privacy is embedded in every organization's DNA. I'm really excited to have her here so we can talk about generative AI, cybersecurity, the problem with algorithms, the future of women in tech, lots of good things. So Amruta, welcome to the Leaders of Transformation.
Thank you so much, Nicole. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, it is wonderful to have you. And before we go any further, I do want to do a shout out to the team at Lemon Pie. What a great name for a business, just saying. Yeah. But Lemon Pie has been wonderful in sending us amazing guests over the years, and they're a podcast booking agency and all of that. And so they introduced us. So thank you for that. We really appreciate it. Appreciate the support of the show. And of course, we appreciate all our listeners and viewers who are out there. And I trust that you're going to gain so much valuable insight for your business and also personally, wherever you're at. I think there's going to be some really good nuggets here and inspiration. So stay tuned to the end, and it'll be good. So let's talk about, Amruta, how you got into tech. Why tech? I mean, you have lots of options. And then also why you're focusing on privacy and security.
So why tech is an interesting question. I was actually, growing up, I actually wanted to be a designer, a product designer, as in a physical product designer, and more on the design side. But then I got very interested into computer design and graphics. And that kind of got me into computer science, computer engineering. And as I got deeper and deeper into this, algorithms, object-oriented programming, all of that just got very, very interesting to me. So my intro to tech was from design. And growing up, I was actually had tech around me, but not the what we call tech today, but real tech, mechanical stuff, machines, and equipments, material handling equipments that my dad used to build. So that was my influence. I think my interests, what I wanted to do, what I wanted to build, got me into tech, kept me there because I got to continue to build interesting products through my journey all the way from Microsoft to Topsy to Salesforce to Cleo to Skyflow, everywhere. The one thread that has been common throughout my tech experience from B2B and B2C is I've worked with data. Data has been core of everything that I have worked with, whether it's customer data, whether it's analytical data, whether it's just, audit logs or anything. And being able to analyze that data, being able to get insights from that data, collecting. And the one thing that's common when you work with data is it's very valuable. Data is money, and you have to be able to protect it in the right way. So that gets me to the second part of your question is I lived the life of having to protect this, having not being able to use data because it was not protected in the right way. Having to sacrifice my resources to just work on data protection while, I couldn't work on the core IP of my product. All because you have to be able to extract value from that data. That's core to your business. And that's why privacy and security becomes critical, because now more than ever with generative AI, data is money. I mean, if you have true original content, you're going to make a lot of money right now selling that content to all of these models for training. But you have to be very, very, very careful of what you're sending. So that's my intro to tech and, where privacy and security becomes important.
So now I'm really curious when you talk about the intellectual property and the value of it. And then specifically what you were saying is I couldn't use the data because it wasn't protected. And how do we identify? There's a lot of content creators out there and companies, organizations, whether it's individuals or whether it's companies that are developing content. What defines original because right now a lot of it is being generated and it's
Yes.
not original because it's
Yes.
coming from a data source. So what is defined as original? And then, yeah, how do you use it and protect it
Yeah.
effectively?
I think what is defined as original depends on the source of the data, right? So if we look at businesses today, one of the most common place where you have to really protect the data and be careful, and the originality of it has to be maintained, is health data. And a lot of times, what is the original data when it comes to user data is controlled by user privacy policies, consent, and all of that. And there are regulations across the globe that make sure that that's not violated. So that, because user data changes hands. Like every time you go search somewhere, there's a cookie, you're consenting that that can be used. Now they're going to sell it to someone else, they're going to sell it to someone else, they're going to sell it to someone else. But the original is where you actually gave the primary consent. So that's kind of the
So
whole
does that apply all the way through?
exactly.
Yeah,
It should apply.
should.
Right way to think about it. And that's what I keep telling people. I'm like, our life is not changed when you think of user data. We have all this stuff. There's regulation. Generative AI is just a new piece of technology. The same regulation applies here too. If I consented that my data should not be used for recommendations to be given to people, there's no reason you put it in a model and have an LLM read it or something and give responses based on my data either, right? So it's the same regulation that holds true for unstructured usage in generative AI like it did for everything else. There is no reason that it doesn't matter.
So as somebody who is a content creator and has hundreds of videos and and podcasts, almost 500 podcasts now, um, how do you actually define that? Because you'd have to go back to the source of where you published it.
Yes.
And I think of, like, I know I'm getting granular because now I'm like, okay, I'm interested for
Yes.
myself. YouTube, right?
Yeah.
You upload a video to YouTube.
Correct.
It asks you, do you want to allow embedding? Do you
Yes.
allow snippets? All of
Yes.
that.
Yes.
So essentially, if I don't want the data used in any form, I would say no.
Correct. That's what it is. And what's lost is the fine print in privacy policies, because we are all used to just scroll, 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 accept, scroll, accept. And now that's becoming more dangerous because the accept, you never know where it's going to go. And the danger, beauty, whatever you call it, of generative AI is you'll never know when it resurfaces. It could resurface today, in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years. You never know. And
Yeah.
that's the tricky part. The tracing is not as simple as it is with structured data when it goes into large language models.
So when you were talking earlier about you had data, but you couldn't use it, is because
Yeah.
you actually discovered data and then you went back and realized that this data had actually been protected.
So it's multiple, right? One is consent. I had data, but users had not allowed me to use it for particular purposes. And then there is, for example, the best business use cases. When I was at Salesforce, we did a lot of AI and ML pieces, but I can't mix the data of customers to use it. One customer does not let me use their data to train a model and use that model for another customer. It's not allowed, because then there's a lot of intellectual value, property value within that data. Now, the other interesting problem that's coming up now, we are all remote working. Everyone's working in every different part of the world. How do you know that a person sitting somewhere in some remote country is not accessing your data, which is not supposed to cross borders? How do you do that? So those are all the
Yeah.
different reasons why you have the data. It's like this beautiful safe, right? You can see it, the data is there, but it's locked up. You just can't use it because you don't have the ability to use that raw data. And that's kind of one of the things that we started looking at Skyflow and started enabling people to do.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about Skyflow and how does
Yeah.
this work, and even as you talk about that, why this is different because it's an API versus how
Yeah.
it's normally done.
So with Skyflow, at the core, we are a data privacy vault. So what it is everyone works with sensitive data. Every business has customer data, it may be personal data, financial data, health data, anything that you may. And we wanted to make sure that you don't get into the lockbox situation where a lot of times people are like, okay, I am protecting the data at rest. I have encrypted it. It's in a box. But when you're using it, you're decrypting it. It's out there in the open. So you're not really protecting it. So the goal for Skyflow was how can we help you isolate, find that sensitive information, take that out of where it is, put it in a secure place that is adhering to all these global regulatory things, replace that data with what we call a polymorphic token so that you can still continue to do your work, but it's not with the real data. The real data is still protected. So that's the crux of like what we built is we have this core IP called polymorphic tokenization that basically lets you work with encrypted data without having to decrypt it. So you're now so all the cross-border transfers, being able to do analytics, analyze, transactional, all of that you can do on the sensitive data and be data resident compliant, HIPAA, GDPR, CCPA, DPDP, all these things. So that's what Skyflow is, and it extends all the way from standard structured data all the way to unstructured data. It could be audio files or video files or PDFs or anything.
Okay, so how would that work?
So the way it would work is multiple different ways, right? Because everyone's architecture is different. So you could, what we say, do a complete shift left, which is as you're collecting the data, you could just embed a Skyflow SDK. And as the data comes in, it just goes in the vault. And you just get your polymorphic token that you store on your end. And then whenever you want to get the real data back, we have governance rules. So you set governance rules. So it may say things like, Nicole can actually see the whole social security number, but Amruta can see only the last four. And only the first three of area code of a phone number should be visible to someone else and redact everything else. So those rules get applied on the governance layer as you're giving me the polymorphic token and saying, hey, you know what, give me the real data back. I'm going to be like, are you allowed to see the real data? Okay, if you are, what part of it are you allowed to see? And then I'll give you that back. And everything gets audited. So that's one of the core pieces. Now you could also integrate anywhere in the stack, just before your database, just before your ETL, in your data lake, store, warehouse, anywhere. So that's where you start shifting right. And at any of these stages, we have UDFs, we have APIs, any kind of different integration points that will let you transfer the data directly.
And so if a company hasn't done this yet, they can go back and
Yeah.
pull that data, like even if it's out there, they can pull it
Yes,
back. Okay.
100%. Because most of the time, what's happening is for what we call brownfield, right? You have data in your databases or you have data in your analytical stores. Now, sometimes if you don't know where your PII data is, there are enough tools there that even we use to go and say, okay, these 20 databases have PII distributed, right? And most of the time, people are using an API gateway, and it's an easy plugin to an API gateway to talk to Skyflow. Similarly, with any data stores, each one of them, we have UDFs for every possible data store that you have, including like some native apps and stuff. So you can easily integrate with that. And then we just identify where the PII is, replace it. So now you're good.
This is fascinating. I mean, I don't know much about this, so I'm like trying to track with you on exactly all of the different steps, but I get the gist. I get the gist of it.
I think the way you want to think about it is if you have, let's say, and this happened to me, right? When I was at Cleo, we were a health company. You don't have that big of an engineering team. And my core product was to serve families, build out that whole piece. I couldn't do business with other companies because I was not HIPAA compliant. I was not securing the data the way it needed to be secured. None of these people would sign deals with me. because I needed to prove that I can secure the data. And with that small engineering team, it took me 8 months. 8 months of not working on my core product. So you're
Wow.
losing time. You
Yeah.
don't have the expertise because, not everyone in the world is a cryptography expert and things like that. So it takes time. So those are the things you want to think about is that core IP to your company? And it's similar to like nobody creates a database anymore, right? Nobody's building a database. You just use a database that's there. Similarly, if you're dealing with sensitive or private data, you don't need to do everything. Just use the word.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the algorithms.
Yeah.
I know we were talking about this before about even like the biases and all
Yeah.
of that.
So it's interesting, right? So I worked a lot on the AI world. And when I was working on, not generative AI, just AI has been around for a long time, bias was a big deal. Because what happens is any model, whether it's a regular ML model or it's a generative AI, training data is there, right? And that is where people generate training data. Now,
Yeah.
when you're generating training data, you're using an algorithm to generate that data. And that algorithm could have bias. And what I mean by that is, let's say you are generating data for um, women between 30 and 60 who live in United States. It will just generate data, but based on the algorithm, it could generate data only for, certain races, certain cultures, certain, nationalities, or like married women, women with kids, and, all these things. That's the bias I'm talking about, right? And when that bias goes into an algorithm, it gets trained and it's answering and it's giving responses based on that. Which is why when you're talking about training data, it's very important to make sure it's equitable and it's in relation to real data. Otherwise, you are training a model completely differently. And the best way I tell people this is, imagine you have a baby and the baby is being brought up in a bubble, is not seeing certain things out there in the world. What is it going to learn?
Right.
Just what's around. What you expose the baby to is what it's going to see. It's the same exact thing with any AI model. It will learn what you show it, and you have to make sure you're not, kind of growing that AI baby in a biased data environment. And that is the biggest problem with biases with
So we're
models.
so we're talking about security, we're talking about privacy and protecting your own privacy.
Yeah.
We're talking also about the accuracy of it and the diversity of it because yeah, it's like if I go online and I search something, everybody knows this, right? You search for something, now it starts to, or I'm regularly searching for a certain thing, it's going to say, oh, that's what Nicole likes, and it's going to send me more of that. But again, that is now taking my initially, we have the whole internet to
Yes.
search. In
Yes.
theory, we do, but the reality is it's giving me what it thinks I already like, which
Ex-
then limits my own vision and
Yes.
creativity and what's possible out there. So
Yes.
it's interesting. So it's
Yeah.
an interesting world we live in. And
Ex-
do you have any thoughts on how do you actually prevent that from happening?
Yeah. Couple of things, right? So I've been telling a few folks. So I think we need to start moving away a little bit from using synthetic data because synthetic data introduces a lot of the bias. We should try and use real data as much as possible because then you're staying pure to what it is. You're not losing referential integrity. And this is also one of the things that when we started doing what we call context aware tokens, that was one of the goals where we're like, how can we make sure that we can de-identify the data, but keep it real and keep it useful so that it is still not, because the easiest thing is, let's say there is a document that has Amruta and that gets changed to Jill. Imagine the whole conversation. It's very different versus let's keep it neutral. Amruta becomes name underscore 123, right? Rather
Yeah.
than giving it a name or a synthetic version of it. So that's one of the ways that I think you can do that. And then for the accuracies and security, they're like you have to emit the accuracy scores with every model. And you can tune it. You have to be able to be transparent. So there's a lot of conversation about responsible AI right now, right? And a big part of that is transparency, is privacy, is making sure, there's no bias, is making sure that all the security practices that we know are also applied to these new models and generative AI models as well. Because just like, script injection at some point was the craziest thing you could do. Now there is a big thing around prompt injection. There's a lot of prompt hacking going on where you can just like get information out that is crazy by doing the right kind of prompt hacking. So there is that layer of responsible AI now we have to get into.
Which makes what you're doing even more valuable because as people are figuring out how hackers are
Yes.
figuring out how to get to that content, then data, then all the more reason to
Yeah.
protect it. So, as a business owner and somebody that consults businesses, and the business, and everybody says the number one thing is to make profit. Sure, I actually think it's to create value, and then the
Yes.
profit comes. My personal opinion, and that's something that's actually more larger, well
Yeah.
known now. But so people are buying into that idea of that it's more than that, and there's still certain things that need to happen, and there's only so much bandwidth and so much resource, right, a business has to be able to do all of these things.
Yeah.
And so when I think about like all of this, and I go, this will keep people up at night. and the CEO is going, oh my gosh, all right,
Yes.
or tech directors and so forth going, oh my gosh, that's my responsibility to deal with it, and I don't even know, like, are we doing a good job? How do we know? So I almost think like we need a one-stop shop. And it sounds like Skyflow, what you're saying
Yeah.
is like becoming that one-stop shop for this so that it can plug into it and
Yeah.
it's taken
Yeah.
care of and you're not having to worry about.
Yeah. It's funny. I was talking to my CEO, and one of the ideas he had was we should have a billboard that just has the picture of a baby sleeping soundly, that just says sleep like a baby to all the CEOs, the CTOs, and CIOs, and
Yeah.
use Skyflow, because that's true what you said, right? It's sleepless nights. Because if you look at, I mean, recently, the biggest one, what happened with Change Healthcare, right? The data breach that happened there. One single data breach is crazy. Like, I think people don't really fathom the extent of it until it happens. It's not only data that has gone of everyone you've served, right? Selfishly, from like you were saying, for a company, value is important. Now you have squashed the value. Nobody's going to come to you. You are paying a fine monetarily. Your reputation has been damaged. And imagine your insurance price for anything else your company decides to do in the future.
Yeah.
So
It's huge.
it's huge. And a lot of people just think, oh, we'll do it later. Oh no, this takes care of it. And until they're breached, and nobody knows who's going to get breached next.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. Uh,
Wow.
it's scary, I know, but there
Well,
are
thank
solutions.
God there's people like you that know how to do all that stuff. So God bless you for doing that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about women in tech. And I know you have a different perspective. You and I actually agree on this. Like we were talking about this, and it was like, yes, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
A different perspective on diversity and inclusion.
I think, I mean, diversity and inclusion is extremely important, but
Yes.
how it's done is also very important.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think when this whole piece around, hey, we need to make sure women have a seat on the table had started a lot of years ago, a lot of companies were like, oh, 30% or 20% of the people here need to be women. And this, I think it's about, at that point in time, we forgot to tell them why.
Yes.
why is it important to have people, women on the table? It's not just a number. It's not because your performance review is going to say, okay, did you interview 30% women for this role before you hired someone? But why? I think diversity is about experience, it's about thought, it's about point of views. And I think that is why we talk about having different people on the table. It's not just a woman, it's not just a race, a culture, or even an upbringing. It is about the diversity of thought because every single person on the table is making a decision. And
Yes.
to make sure that that decision is made in the world that we live in today, which is not
Yes.
singular.
Yes. 100%. And that's where, as I was hearing a lot of like clients, even, they're like, well, we need to have this, we need to have that. And it's like, they're not thinking through, like you said, why that is actually necessary. So they're doing the token hire, the diversity hire, and then it's actually creating the opposite effect of what they're actually looking for. And so you got to hire capable people to be at the
Yes,
table to make quality decisions. Just
yes,
make sure they're coming from a diverse background. So
100%.
with that in mind, what are you noticing with women in tech and like the amount of women that are getting into tech and that talent pool is even there?
I think we have a lot of smart women in tech, especially now. I think recently I read an article where it said a lot of the generative AI pieces are being led by women, if you think of it. And that is extremely powerful. And this whole myth, since, it was an old myth around, oh, women are not good at math and science, and that's all been debunked now.
Yeah.
I think we don't even need to talk about it. So I don't think there's a dearth of women in tech. Sometimes you don't know where to look. And sometimes there might be like, hey, I'm looking for this one specific thing, and they're not there, which is fine. If there is a need, go hire the right person, as you said. But I think people need to look.
So where do you look?
I look at different, I look, honestly, network is the best. Look at LinkedIn, look at networks. There are lots of folks out there that, hit me up if anyone wants to. Like, I know who know a lot of people out there. And, the best thing I have found is if you cold call a female leader and you tell them, hey, I'm looking for someone in this role. Would be great to find like a woman leader like yourself. Do you know anyone? I bet you 99 to 100% of them will respond to you.
That's true. Yeah.
I will. And
Yeah.
I know you will. I know so many, every single person I know will. So I think it's a little bit of taking that effort. I think we don't take that effort to do that. And it's very easy because let's be honest, the population of women in tech today is much less than the men. So if you look around you, you won't find them. But and maybe it will never be 50-50. But that doesn't mean you can't find them and you can't pull them in. And honestly, the other thing I would say is find women in tech, maybe not in the specific role. So one of the people who I used to have on my team, she's stellar. She's like a VP right now and stuff. She was in marketing and then she had a product brain. She had such a product brain. And we were like, hey, you know what? Why don't you come and work in product? She didn't have a computer science degree. She didn't have a computer engineering degree. She came in and then she learned on the job. She was smart enough to just get it. Then she started like, recently I heard she was even running some infrastructure projects and stuff like that. So your education also doesn't restrict you in terms of what you can do. My first mentor in my career was an English major, and I was a technical product manager. So nothing stops you.
So when you look at that person back then, when you looked at them, did you have a respect for them? Obviously, they must have had some skill at that point, but did you respect them or did you think like, what the heck?
The funniest thing is I never knew she was an English major until much later.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It never occurred to me
Yeah.
because I met her She's talking technical stuff. She knows everything. She's able to teach me. She's able to guide me. Why would I even think about
Yeah.
what she learned to come to
Yeah.
where she is? And I found out much later that she was an English major. And I was like, Kirsten, I never knew. She's like, oh, yeah, you never asked me. I'm like, yeah, it's good to know.
Well, it does challenge us to think outside the box
Yes.
in terms of like when you said you're looking at the person who's in marketing and you're seeing the talent. I think that's a skill that businesses really need to develop further
Yes.
is the talent search to
Yeah.
be able to see people beyond the thing that they do day in day out to actually take interest in them
Yeah.
and to learn what they're good at. It's those transferable skills
Correct. And
and
think
where else can they be applied?
100%. And I tell all women, raise your hand. Because think about the world that we are in right now. Nobody knows generative AI. There's 1% of the population who knows how all this stuff works. Everyone is learning right now. We are all at the same level. Raise your hand, say, I want to do this, learn something, and just get out there.
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of responsibility even we women have to take because, unfortunately, through the years, we have been boxed and it takes a little bit of effort. And then also the others need to also take a little bit of effort to recognize that we've been boxed and bring us out of it. And it's funny actually. So I really respect, this leader in Salesforce. There was this time when everyone's like, oh, she's here because, she's a woman and this and that. And then he goes, yeah, you are here because years ago, your granddad talked to someone and that person talked to someone else who got a job, who got a job, who got a job. So we are
Yeah.
all here because we got pulled up by someone. So it's now our job to give it back. And that's why we need to pull in a lot of these people. So tomorrow, her daughter, sister, niece, neighbor, someone can also be on the table like you. So I think that was just an amazing thought if you think of it.
Yeah, that's definitely I was thinking that's a transformative thought right there because we oftentimes we look at that as a negative thing, but in fact, like you said, I mean, all success comes through relationships.
Yeah.
And so, just to put it on the table like that. I love that. This
I
is
mean,
so good. Yeah.
it's awesome. I mean, this was Parker Harris, right? Like the co-founder, and he's just an amazing human.
Yeah.
And he's just like, we are here because someone did a favor for our kind. So now it's time for us to do that for
Yeah.
everyone else.
And it's important for women, like you said, it's important for us to step up and actually raise our hands because I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I've noticed a lot of women are waiting for someone to notice them.
Yes.
And I don't know if that goes back to like men ask women out on dates, like we're supposed to just wait until somebody asks us out. And I know that there's some
Yeah,
romance to that and so forth, allure to that. But when it comes to your career, waiting for somebody to notice you, you might be waiting a long time.
you might be. And I think this is, you're right. I mean, I think for me, coming from an Indian culture, it's also a cultural thing. Because culturally we are told to shut up and not question things and not
Yeah.
raise your voice and stuff like that. So for a lot of people it might also be cultural. And I think for me, I know it took me some time to get out of my shell to be able to even speak up in a room because
Yeah.
when there are loud voices, when there is an aggressive tone of voice, there is enough of people speaking over you, restating what you have said. That happens across the board. And I think that is where I believe people who are strong and in positions of power, like yourself, myself, we need to also help the other people. We need to help the other women to kind of get their voice heard because not everyone will organically have that strength or that self confidence to be able to do it. And
Hmm.
that is where a little bit of a responsibility of the community also comes in.
Yeah.
It's let's make sure and honestly, sometimes it's even men. There are
Yeah.
men that I
As
have worked with.
allies. Hmm.
Yeah, there are men that honestly, there are men that I have worked with who hesitate to speak up.
Oh, okay. Yes. Men that has, yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think
because
it's
and I think
personality as well, right?
personality, right? So it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think we have to think about why women need to be at the table, the diversity aspect of it, and how we can bring them on the table.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've gone from data privacy, security, AI, generative AI, and algorithms, and now we're talking about diversity, inclusion, and bringing the diversity to the table. There's a lot that we covered, and I'm just curious: is there anything that we didn't cover that's kind of like a passion for you that we want to touch on before we finish up?
Um, I think, I mean, we talked about most of the things. I think my passion is tech, is the innovation that's going to come out of AI right now. Like it is just transformational, the kind of stuff that we can do. I feel so I feel so excited for my kids, like they're going to be in an interesting new world that we've only seen in movies, maybe. And then I am super passionate about, getting a seat at the table for every single smart woman. I have had the pleasure of working with such amazing women, and I want to make sure every single person out there has that opportunity because it
Yeah,
is truly transformational.
yeah. So then it's a matter of whether they want to be at the table, but not a matter if they're allowed. Yeah,
Correct,
that's good.
correct,
I
correct.
love that. And when you talk about AI, it is exciting. And then there's, of course, a lot of fear. And so to hear your anticipation about it and the world that we're going to live in, because some of us, it's
I
like the
think that's why I'm
Jetsons,
building
it's like, I don't know. Do I want to live in a world like that? Uh,
That's why I'm building all these privacy things. So I
yes.
think that's why I'm more excited is because I know how it can be done in a privacy safe way. There are ways where we can gain the pleasure of all these advancements in AI without being scared.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think
That's the
that
key.
exactly.
So good. Amruta, thank you so much. I appreciate this conversation. This was encouraging for me and just, yeah, really, really enjoyable. So thank you so much. Where can people find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, of course. You can also find me on Twitter, Amruta M. Um, and send me an email, amruta@skyflow.com. I am here.
And then we'll also make sure, of course, that's all in the show notes as well. The website, skyflow.com. Uh, just real quick, who is that for? Like size company? So,
Anyone.
yeah,
So we serve anyone from a startup all the way to a large enterprise. So
awesome.
we have customers across the board, across the globe, any region, any country, any business, any vertical. So hit us up.
Fantastic. Well, that's good because we've got listeners all over the world. So they can take advantage of that. That's fantastic. Well, thank you again so, so much. And I always say leaders of transformation take action. Amruta is obviously a perfect example of that, taking action on what she's doing in her career and all that. I always say, yeah, we take action because nothing happens until we take action. And maybe for you, it might just be raising your hand and saying, I can do that. I can learn that. I can give me the shot to do that. Or maybe it's looking at it from a business standpoint and it's time to revisit your data privacy structure and how you're doing that, and maybe it's taking action on that. Maybe it's taking action as an individual content creator, looking at how can I protect my content that I'm been my original content that I'm creating, and look at that, and so I just encourage you to take action on something that you learned here today, because without it, like I said, nothing happens. We'd love to hear your stories, how you do that, what the impact has been for you, and any questions or comments or how we can support you, of course, in being a leader of transformation. You can reach out to us on leadersoftransformation.com. You can go to our social media feeds and find us and follow us there. And if you liked it and you enjoyed this, and maybe there's a lady that woman out there, men will enjoy it as well. But and specifically, we're talking about women in that might be interested in getting in tech. Send this to them. Maybe it'll just be an encouragement for them that, hey, maybe I can learn something new. Maybe I can get a seat at the table and pass it on to them as well. So anyway, again, thank you for being here today. We hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you next week on another episode of the Leaders of Transformation. Have a great day.